Joining us this evening, retired criminologist Keith Spencer. You're also a former assistant warden at the Maximum Security Edmonton Institution. And from the John Howard Society, executive director and criminologist Chris Hay. We should note as well that we extended an invitation to the Solicitor General to join this discussion. However, it was declined. We are, though, very pleased to have both of you gentlemen. Thank you for joining us in Alberta Primetime.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Before we get started, a former prisoner's perspective now on his experiences in and out of jail. Alberta Primetime's Emma Parmar has that story.
Grant Robinson has been in and out of jail for 15 years.
I was smoking crack, a lot of it, and I would do anything from breaking into businesses to stealing brand new cars to fraud.
He spent most of his time at the Edmonton Remand Centre. Robinson says he struggled with overcrowding.
You got a bathroom in it, a steel toilet, and it's not suitable for 3 people, not at all. It's actually inhumane.
Out of jail for just over a year, Robinson is trying to get his life on the right track. And part of that means coming here to the Bissell Centre for support.
If I wasn't going to church, I'd probably be doing crime.
It's where he met Pastor Rick Chapman, who helped him straighten up.
He is gradually pacing himself into this lifestyle which he's choosing now, which is a life without crime, a life without drugs.
Now Robinson rents a room and even has a bank card. But adjusting to life on the outside hasn't been easy.
Often people are left released from a hospital, released from a psychiatric unit, released from the remand, without anybody to greet them on the other side. And the community workers kind of scramble a little to keep up.
Now Robinson has a lesson for others who are putting the pieces together.
Don't go down the wrong road because it's not worth it.
Emma Parmar, Alberta Primetime.
So a brief glimpse there into the life of a former prisoner, someone who's very familiar with the Edmonton Remand Centre. Gentlemen, how commonplace is his story? Keith, your thoughts?
Well, I think the Remand Centre is a very busy place. The Edmonton Remand Centre, I think, is the busiest remand centre in Canada. It is overcrowded in many respects. Mind you, I had to share a bedroom with my brother all my life, and I thought that was torture, but at least it was a choice. I think what happens is that the way the courts work in giving 2-for-1 kind of sentences, the longer you can stay in the remand centre, the shorter your sentence is going to be. So it's prompted a lot of offenders to, especially after sentence, to try to stay there as long as possible, and it's created an overcrowding that's just caused by the way they're playing the system, hoping they can stay there extra time before they sign their waivers and leave, so that they can get longer sentence credit. And I think that's one of the reasons why it is a very busy place.
Chris, your thoughts on Mr. Robinson's story?
Well, I think overcrowding just doesn't occur just in the remand center. I think it occurs in other facilities as well. And even though this story is specific to the remand center, I think overcrowding, I think he's very correct. I think it's inhumane. Even a Supreme Court justice just recently in the U.S. indicated that it was unconstitutional and inhumane. But I think more importantly, I think overcrowding doesn't lend itself well to proper programming, rehabilitation, and eventual reintegration into society. You just can't manage these types of people, let alone the safety to the offenders themselves while there, let alone the safety to the correctional facility employees. So I think there's a number of issues we have with overcrowding.
And is the overcrowding just limited to the remand centers, or could we, broad stroke, apply that to all provincial correctional facilities?
I think business is booming. Most all of our institutions are very full. And the Edmonton Max, for example, they're going to be expanding it, building a new addition. So there's a lot of customers out there, and I think Chris would tell you that it's extremely busy in all institutions right now.
However, what's interesting, though, is that crime has been declining for almost 20 years in a row, year after year after year. So business is booming. I would say that's exactly correct. But we're not, in my opinion, we're not actually housing the correct people in prison. We have the wrong people there. And I mean, look at just Aboriginal First Nations individuals, right? 2.7% of the population, but constitute 18 to 21% of our prison population. So I mean, I think these are a lot of issues that are well beyond the scope of what we can talk about here. But Keith is very correct that business is booming, but I question why it's booming.
Provincially, are we averting risk by putting people behind bars instead of setting them out on bail?
Well, I think what happens is, first of all, the types of crimes that people are committing are very different today than they were 10, 20 years ago. There's such a lot of drug gang-related kinds of offenses. So those types of offenders are maybe higher risk, more dangerous, and so jails have become the preferred outcome for some of those kinds of people. Bail is a very tricky thing because once an offender has some charges against him, and because of the way we sentence in Canada, concurrently, they got 1 or 2 charges. If they get 10 charges, they're going to get exactly the same total time. So sometimes bail is, you're sending guys back on the street who are quite likely to reoffend. And the reason they didn't get bail to begin with is no jobs, no residence, no stability, high risk. So on the other hand, keeping them in jail, waiting for a trial, has its issues too. I think Chris will tell you.
Keith's right. It's a difficult, these are very complex issues. I think I still fall back on the notion that although you're right, crime has changed, I think, qualitatively, not quantitatively, unless you're talking about it going down, but qualitatively perhaps it has. But I still do think that there's a lot of individuals within the prison system that can be better served in community corrections, meaning serve their sentences in the community under some sort of supervision order or whatever the case may be. We know, I'm not sure the general public necessarily knows, but we know that the outcomes of community supervision far surpass the outcomes of being imprisoned. In other words, recidivism rates are considerably lower for community sentences, let alone the cost. It might cost you $15,000 a year to serve it in a community, and it costs you $110,000, $120,000 in a federal institution, or $80,000, $85,000 in a provincial institution. So if you look at the cost plus your outcome, or what you're trying to achieve, I do think that there's a lot of individuals that can be better served in the community. In fact, I was speaking to someone that deals in, and it's fairly high up in corrections, and there's a good segment of the remand population that is average serving time in the remand population is 17 days. So we're starting to question now, what could be served in 17 days? Is it a punishment? Is it for rehab? What could you do in the 17 days? So we're throwing a lot of money, and we're producing overcrowding for a good segment of the population that is only going to serve 17 days anyway. So there's a lot of issues we have to look at.
For, say, those 17 days, how dangerous is that situation behind bars for those individuals? Is the prisoner population being separated such that someone with a lesser offense is being kept away from that violent, hardened criminal who could cause harm?
Well, you can look at this so many different ways, but oftentimes institutions are a safe haven for people that are, really bad, wired on drugs, sleeping in the gutter. I've had clients OD and die in the gutter. Getting them off the street, getting them into an institution, cleaning them up, coming up with a new release plan. You can artfully use institutions to kind of intervene and protect the offender from himself as well as from the community, so that there is a side, you could argue, for the benefit of institutions as well as for the detriment. One of the realities is, whether you're talking remand center or whether you're talking provincial institutions, most offenders are doing very short sentences. So it's difficult to implement and execute a program during the short time that they're in an institution. So you're really just kind of cleaning them up, holding them for a very short time, and they're out all of a sudden. And I think that makes programming very, very difficult. Plus, you need to have a motivated customer, and motivation's a big issue.
We're going to pick up that point after the break. Is Alberta's justice system turning out model systems? prisoners, that is. We want your opinion. How effective are jails in our province at reforming prisoners? Tell us what you think by following the contact links at albertaprimetime.com. We are back in 1 minute. Stay with us.